So, it's 9:09. That took a turn for the better, which is great. And I'm so thankful for what it is that God's doing. Mike, after service, we'll chat. I have a lot of things in my heart that I want us to chat about, and it's good. Today, why we're all here is to talk about relationships, all right? So I just kind of want to dive into this. I don't have some clever, seamless transition from what just happened into where we're going. So we're just going to go into it, and I hope that's cool. I was trying to think of something clever. Nothing came. That's all right. I should have asked. Anyway. So we're starting the first part of a multi-part series, probably going to be 4 parts, in this conversation about relationships, okay? The first part is today. Listen, next Friday, I know that David's going to announce this at the end because he's going to do announcements at the end because all of this happened. Next Friday is not part 2 of the relationship series. Next Friday is the first day of a 3-day couples conference for married couples here at the church or even... Can I do this? I can do this, right? Yeah, even couples, even if you're not married, that's fine, as long as you're a couple. Is that where we're headed? Did you just... It has to be married couples? It has to be married couples. Yeah, I just checked with our church's event planner, who actually happens to be Mike, and it has to be married couples. So if you happen to get married before Friday, you can come. That's next week. 2 weeks from now, there is youth night, but I'm in North Carolina or Canada, depending on the day. And Peter's in Tennessee, we're going to be scattered that weekend. But be here because it's youth night. And then the week after that, we go to part 2, part 3, part 4, just so you guys are aware of what's going on. Part 2, part 3, part 4. Yeah, there'll definitely be 4 parts. There might be a 5th, all right? But we'll work on that, which is great. We'll have great fun, all right? So what I wanted to talk about in relationships is, it's funny. If I were to ask you guys to give an example of something that happened that would kind of be a characteristic of a bad relationship, I think that we'd have a pretty easy time coming up with something, right? Give me something. What's a characteristic of a bad relationship? You guys ever observe a bad relationship? You guys ever observe something that you're like, I don't want a guy like that, or I don't want a girl like that? Disrespectful. Definitely a bad characteristic of a relationship. What else? Lay it on me. Bringing up all of the past. Yeah, that's a horrible characteristic. What else? Doesn't shower. Also a terrible characteristic. Also hilarious. I caught that. Ooh, so good. She said making decisions that annoy or disagree with decisions that you've already made together. Yeah. Totally a bad characteristic. You ever, if I asked you to write down 10 examples that you've witnessed, either in person, in your family, or something that you've seen on TV or something of a bad example. No, you know what? Forget TV. Just in life. If I had to ask you to write down 10 characteristics, 10 bad things that you saw happen in a relationship one way or another, I bet you could write me 10 examples pretty quick. If I had to ask you of 10 great examples of great characteristics in marriage, I bet you'd have a hard time. Did you know that? Think about that. How many bad marriages or bad relationships can you think of off the top of your head? How many, not they stayed together so it's good. I mean great marriages or relationships do you know of? There's a lot less, isn't there? The ratio is skewed in one way versus the other. I bet we could come up with things in theory. Well, good relationship, they're respectful, they're loving, they're kind, they're patient, they're, just keep on listing the fruits of the Spirit, you know what I mean? It's easy, long-suffering, okay? It's easy to come up with theory. But if I asked you for examples, it would be much more difficult, wouldn't it? I know what all of you would do. You'd think of your parents. You'd be like, well, my dad's, he always buys my mom flowers, and that's cool. And I like this that my mom does for my dad, and I like this. And, you could think of a couple of things. But if you stepped outside of your family, it would be pretty hard. Young people that are dating, it'd be pretty hard. Maybe you could think of some quick ones here or there, but I just feel like it's really skewed in the other direction. In fact, it is. Now, what I'd like to get at is really just this, is because I think we all desire healthy relationships, whether it's a relationship between me and my dad, or you and your mom, or you and your best friend, or a husband and a wife, a boyfriend and a girlfriend. Whatever the relationship is, I think that we all want healthy relationships. But listen to me, all right? Healthy relationships doesn't matter who it is between. Me and my parents, me and my family, me and my brother, me and my wife. Healthy relationships come from healthy people. And healthy people come from a healthy relationship with God. You following that? Healthy relationships this way come from people that are healthy, and people that are healthy come from healthy relationships this way, between me and the Lord, okay? Because the more that you have the character of Christ, I mean, think about all of the greatest characteristics that you can, and that literally encompasses Christ. Or you can just look at Scripture where it talks about the fruits of the Spirit, right? Literally, who wouldn't want to be married to that? That's like perfection, you understand? Healthy relationships between people come from healthy people, and healthy people come from a healthy relationship with Christ. It's people that are constantly being proactive and working on themselves and have the Spirit of the Lord living in them and living through them. Healthy relationships, come from people who have healthy relationships with God. I want you to understand something because it's very important, and it's just that healthy people are whole people. They're not perfect, they're complete. There's a huge difference, by the way. And I think a lot of times we make this mistake, and a lot of times people that aren't Christian make this mistake when they look at Christians. Okay, healthy people are whole people. They're complete people. They're not perfect. You see, let me ask you this. What is a perfect tree? What's a perfect dog? You understand what I'm getting at? What's a perfect tree? Does it have 4,675 leaves? Is it pine needles? Is it 40 feet tall? Is it 25 feet tall? How could you look at a tree and say this tree is perfect and every other tree has to look like this tree? Doesn't make any sense. A perfect tree is one that is complete and whole and exactly the one that is designed to, that is whatever it was designed or created to be. What does a perfect Christian look like? One who is whole in his relationship with Christ. It's that simple. Does that mean that you never sin? No, because the only way that you're ever going to be perfect in that sense is when you die and you come back. You understand? That's it. It's afterlife. That's that version of perfection. Perfection here on earth, it's a wholeness, it's completeness, it's reliant on God. And a lot of times we make that mistake because we try to be perfect the way that Jesus is. We don't want to be like Jesus, we want to be Jesus. Do you understand? And we try to be like perfection itself. And you know what that ends up creating? A life lived in shame because you're never able to meet a mark that you were never created to meet. That sucks. That's a whole other sermon though, all right? We're not going there. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Listen to this. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." Did you catch the complete part? It's saying that whenever you're being tested by all these various trials, let them try you and grow. And grow and grow. I'm going to read it again. "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." Complete there means mature in Christ, ready to overcome temptations and trials, not shaken by every situation, able to handle problems in a mature and in a godly way. Complete. Right? Let me ask you something. Being able to handle problems in a mature and in a godly way, being in a solid relationship with the Lord, do you think that that's a qualifier for somebody who needs to get married? I'd say so. I'd say that's a good starting point. Being able to be complete and whole in Christ. Yeah, I don't mean that you're perfect. I don't mean that you're not going to be better 10 years from now. You should be. Because a healthy, whole tree is a tree that's growing. Okay? Let me ask you this. What does a perfect church look like? That's one of my favorite questions. That you stole the answer. You're a cheater, all right? That's the best answer ever. Because honestly, what does a perfect church look like? You know, I once heard of a movement. I'm certain you guys have heard of it as well. It was way over actually in a whole other continent, and it was a movement that happened a long time ago. It was a huge movement, Christian movement, all right? And there was this guy who was preaching a lot. Made a huge impact, and all of these people started following him pretty much wherever he went, all right? This is like ancient times, all right? But they were following him everywhere he went, and it was like tens of thousands of people, this huge movement of Christianity, all right? And you would think this is the perfect movement. This is it. This is where like the great church is going to come from and so on. And as time progressed, it started huge, tens of thousands of people all over. And you got to understand, they didn't have Wi-Fi or cell phones or cars to drive around. They just, wherever this guy went, they followed, right? And it went from tens of thousands to like 10,000 to like thousands to like hundreds to like 70-something to like just a handful of people. And then in the end, it was like 3 guys. And then at the end, there was nobody. And you and I would look at that from the image that we have of the perfect church and say, that was a failed movement. Do you realize that's the story of Jesus? Wrap your brain around that for a second. That's Christ. He started with tens of thousands, then it was 10,000, it was 100,000, then it was hundreds. Remember where he said, if you don't eat my body or drink my flesh, he was talking about symbolically being together with him, then you have no part of, me in the kingdom. And everybody was like, that teaching is too hard. So they all left, and it was just him and the 12 disciples. And he says to the 12 disciples, not like, oh, I'm so proud of you guys. He's like, what about you guys? Aren't you guys leaving? And then they all reply, Lord, where will we go? You have the words of life. And then up until the cross, there was 3, and then it was just Jesus on the cross because nobody else could go with him where he went. And that was his movement. What does a perfect church look like? Is it 10,000 big? Is it 45? You see, a perfect church is a growing church. A perfect Christian is a growing Christian. Okay, is a healthy Christian, is a whole Christian. And that's what we've got to pursue if we're pursuing relationship. Now, the reason why I bring this up is Genesis 2:24. It says, therefore a man will leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. When do you pursue marriage? That's always the question. Well, when can I start dating? I have 2 sons, and I love them to pieces. And one day, they're going to ask me that stupid question. It's not stupid. It's a real question. I just consider it stupid because I don't want them to struggle with all of that. All right? I am so thankful to God that I don't have daughters because I don't know what I would do if anybody ever tried to date a daughter of mine. Yeah. I would actually create like a 15-page form that any guy would have to fill out as a prerequisite to see, and then it would be an interview process, there would be a gun, like all of that. So I don't have daughters, I have 2 sons, and one day they're going to ask me, they're going to say, hey, Dad, when can we date? When can we start courting? When can we be in a relationship? When can we pursue a relationship with a lovely young lady? Genesis 2:24, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother. It says that does happen. That is a correct thing to happen. When? And be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. If you are unable to leave your mom and your dad, then you are unable to be joined to a wife. And if you are not mature enough to be an adult, then you're not mature enough to do adult things, like, marriage. Marriage isn't for kids, it's for adults. If you're not ready to be an adult, then you're not ready for marriage. It's that simple. Listen, did you know that up until the 1920s, the word teenager, actually, it was even after that. The word teenager didn't exist. Are you aware of that? In the 1920s, it was referred to as the years of adolescence. Adolescence. I did it with one fancy, right? All right? It was called adolescence, the adolescent years. Before that, you know what you were? You were a kid. Then you know what you were next? You were a man. Think about it. Think about like African bush tribes, right? Okay, like the what are those bushmen called? They're super famous. They jump like 6 feet tall. Anybody? Joe, Jackie, and Peter would all know. Anyways, they're super famous. They're not Hutus, they're not Tutsis, they're a thing. Anyways, have you guys ever seen those documentaries where, like, at 13, the boys have to take a spear and go out and hunt a lion, and once they've killed a lion, then they come back a man? Yeah, that's how it was. You were a boy until you were a man. Did you know there's a lot of traditions where you pass on from boy or from girl to man or woman? Let me give you 2 more. In the Jewish tradition, when the boy turns 13, there is a bar mitzvah. You know what happens after the bar mitzvah? He's a man. That's it. You're a man from that day forward. In the Mexican culture, when a girl is, 14 or 15? 15. There is a quinceañera. Okay, however you say that. Yeah. So there is one of those, and a young lady is no longer considered a child, she's considered a woman, okay? In cultures all around the world, and in Jewish culture it wasn't different. You're a boy or a girl until you get to a point where you become a man or a woman. You know what adolescence is? You know what teenager is? This is what it is. You get to have all of the perks of being an adult with the responsibilities of a child. It sounds pretty good, honestly. You have all the perks of being an adult with the responsibilities of a child. You don't have to pay rent. You don't have to pay bills. You don't have to figure out how to feed yourself, how to clothe yourself. You don't have to work a job, but you get to drive a car and make your own decisions and be in relationships and do all of that kind of stuff. Listen to me. It's so important to understand that just because something is good impulsively right in front of you is not the best thing for you. Okay? It's not the best thing for you. Because people ask me all the time, well, Eddie, when is a good time to get into a relationship? And my general answer is this: when you're about a year or less away from being ready for marriage. Because the point of courting or dating biblically is to pursue to get married. Casual dating does not exist within Scripture. It does not exist within the Bible. And I mean, we could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on about that, but that's not going to happen because I want to get through what it is that I brought here. Yeah. So when do you pursue looking to get married? When you're about a year or less is my general guideline. It's not a rule. It's not in the Bible. It's not a scripture. It's just my general guideline. About a year or less is when you, from being able to get married is when you start to pursue that. And the reason why I usually say about a year or less is because if your goal is to pursue a relationship to see if you're going to get married or not, if you don't know in a year, then you got bigger problems. All right? It's probably self-awareness. That person's living a double life. I don't know, something. You should know within a year if you're ready to get married or not. You spend time with somebody and 3 months in, that person says, I don't want to have any kids, and that's a non-negotiable for you. Well, all right, then you know what to do. You spend some time talking to a person, and then you find out that they're not really Christians, but you are. That's a clear answer. It's pretty straightforward from there. Hey, Becky, can you bring me that clicker? I left it up there when I came this way. Thanks. I have some slides, and what I want to do is this, is what we have all the time is we have a million examples of the ways that relationships are not supposed to go. But what I want to do is I want to talk to you guys about the way that a relationship is supposed to go. And I want to look at a couple of different typical relationship patterns that happen. And I want to talk to you about which ones are terrible and why, and which one is fantastic and why. All right? So, because I'm a nerd, I drew graphs. All right? Yeah. Graphs are dope. All right? They're super cool. Dario loves graphs. I love graphs. Who is possibly cooler than Dario or I? So obviously graphs are cool. So anyway, I'm going to give you a review of our 4 different graphs. Yeah, that just blew your mind. I know. If I go fast, anyway. So okay, look. I'll explain this to you. All right. Healthy pace of a relationship, transition into marriage is seamless. So right there at the bottom where the yellow is in the bottom left, I don't have a laser pointer, and even if I did, that's a TV, so it won't matter. Okay, so in the bottom left, where like 0, 0 would be on a graph, that's the beginning of courting or the beginning of the relationship, okay? Going up and down is how close you two are. Going left to right, is the process of time. So you can see there it's got like 4 little tick marks on the bottom. That represents 3-month increments, and then you got the wedding day. You understand? See at the top it says 1 year. All right? The 0 point is when the relationship started. At the top it says asked out. And then if you look over the process of time, it's got 1 year, which is the marriage date. This is a graph of like the perfect goal, okay? The dashed line are things that are reserved for marriage. You see, when you start at the bottom, that's like 0. And then as you start to grow in closeness, you get to a line where everything else past that line is reserved for marriage, okay? That's graph 1. This is graph 2. Graph 2 is where the same time frame, same line, same everything, same measure of time, same line of closeness. It's where the pace of the relationship grows insanely fast, and then you get within 3 months to a place to where you're like, okay, everything past this point is reserved for marriage. Option number 3. Actually, graph number 3 has 2 options. That's right, 2 for the price of 1. So this is reduced down to 3 months, all right? And there's 2 different options. We're going to look at both of those. And then option number 4, this is the 5-year plan. This is the worst plan ever. You understand? It is the worst plan. And in fact, it should not even be called a plan because nobody sets out the date and plans we're going to be in a relationship for 5 years, all right? It's not a 5-year plan. It's a 5-year not plan. It's a 5-year whatever a plan is, the other thing, okay? There's no antonym for plan, all right? I couldn't find any, all right? So it's what it is. Yeah, it's the 5-year anti-plan. Thank you. That's great. Nice, Adi. Adi Budiana Corporate Patent Pending. So this is the opposite of that. You know what this is? This is the 5-year, we woke up one day and realized we'd been in a relationship for 5 years thing, all right? That's what that is, all right? So we're going to ignore that, and actually we're going to come back to the good one in the end. We're actually going to start with slide number 2. So this has a good time frame. You're sitting there and you're going, okay, maybe in a year from now we'll be ready to get married. And that's fine, but the growth is too fast. So what does that mean? That means that somebody followed their impulses. This is when a couple follows every single impulse that they have and are like a kid in a candy store. They eat everything with no regard and end up with a pain in their stomach or their heart or the rest of their lives. We need to be wise and mature. Don't act on impulses, but make a plan. Look, the enemy will use your impulses against you all the time. You know what the enemy says all the time? The enemy says, don't think about how this is going to work. Just think about the here and now. Think about the joy today, and you'll pay for it later. God always says, pay for it today, and then you'll enjoy it later. Let me give you some examples. Every time you're ever tempted to sin, you ever realize you're never tempted to sin in a week from now? You're always tempted to sin now. It's not like, oh man, I'm really tempted tomorrow at 4 o'clock to cuss out a guy. Like that never happens. You know what I mean? Man, tomorrow at 2, I'm scheduling a lie. Like that doesn't happen. You're always tempted to sin in the moment, never in the future, right? And you always think, oh, you know what? I'll just leave work early today, and then you know what? Tomorrow I'll just tell my boss an excuse and I'll just figure it out. You understand? It's always enjoy now, pay later. All right? The Lord always talked about sowing now, reaping later, right? Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever man sows, that he will also reap. He who sows to the flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. He who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. That means you plant today and it grows tomorrow. 1 Corinthians, Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. Work ahead, the growth comes later. Jesus always talked about, for I go to prepare a place for you, for when I return. You understand? He talks about the sacrifices here on earth, although they are just temporary and do not compare at all with the great reward that you will receive later. Pay now, receive later. You understand? It's also it's also why credit cards are bad, because you enjoy it now and you pay it later. Anyway, you're welcome. That was a freebie. That was it. All right. So listen, relationships get out of hand and grow fast in closeness when we allow ourselves to be controlled by our impulses and we are not watchful. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, it says, stay alert, watch out. For your enemy, the devil, he prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. In another translation, it says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Okay, one was the NLT, one was the NKJV. In the NLT, it starts off and it says, stay alert, watch out. For your great enemy, the devil, he prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. It gives you 2 instructions and then it tells you why. It says be vigilant, be sober-minded, watch out, all right? Yeah, stay alert, watch out, be sober, be vigilant. And those are the 2 instructions. And then it tells you why. Because your enemy walks around like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour, all right? So those 2 instructions are insanely important to people that are headed in this direction. All right? Be sober-minded means to not be intoxicated or influenced. Where do we typically hear the word sober? It's whenever somebody was drunk or drinks a lot or has an alcohol problem or has a drug dependency problem, and then they say, I've been sober for X amount of years, meaning I haven't drank in X amount of years. I haven't done drugs in X amount of years. Okay? That means that they're not underneath the influence of things that will sway and throw off balance their ability to make judgments. So it's saying don't be intoxicated by anything, but instead be vigilant, be watchful, watch out, because there's bad, horrible things, walking around seeking whom he may devour. Be sober-minded. Don't be distracted or intoxicated by our emotions. Emotions are great in the right places, but they're devastating in the wrong. When we let our emotions take control of us, that's how we end up full of regret, confusion, and hurt later on. You ever buy food when you're hungry? It's the worst idea. Listen, I don't care how much food you order at Jack in the Box, but when you're hungry, you throw in 2 monster tacos every time. All right? That's my life. All right? And let me get the extra large with the curly fry and 2 monster tacos. And I never eat the 2 monster tacos. I only eat one of them, and then the other one I start to eat out of pity and shame. All right? It's just how that goes. All right? It's true. You ever go shopping when you're hungry? You get what I'm getting at? Like you go and you order a bunch and then you eat half of it and you thought you were going to devour the whole thing, but at the end of it, you're like, dude, I'm so full. If I open my mouth, I can touch the top of the food. Like you're full. You understand? So So buying food when you're hungry is terrible afterwards, not in the here and now, though. In the here and now, you think you're making the best decision you ever made. That's what happens when you work on impulses. That's what happens whenever you allow your hunger or your circumstances or your situation to be able to intoxicate, influence you, and throw off your sense of judgment. You ever buy things in a rush? You ever see? That's why infomercials are always the same way. Next 10 callers get a X, Y, or Z. You think they actually keep track of that? They just get you to buy things. They don't care. You understand? And then after 50 callers, then they cut it. But the point is that when you find out that it's only the next 10 callers I better call right now, you don't have time to make a judgment call. You have to do it on impulse. You ever buy things off of auctions? Oh my God. There's this new auction in Sacramento that I found out about. And I just started scanning through things because it's so terrible, the website. And I bid on something, I bid on something else, and I bid on something else. And then when I went to like my thing to see how many things I had bid on 10 different things. And I thought to myself, dude, I don't want half of this stuff. But the timer was counting down, so I was under pressure. So I did it out of impulse. Do you understand? So the idea is that whenever you're doing things out of impulse, you get to that line real quick. Stupid fast, okay? Yeah, seeing an opportunity to do something romantic that would be possibly cross the line, but you take it anyway. Look, this couple says that I would never cross the line in a relationship, but yet they build a habit of following in the other impulses, and when the habit has grown strong enough, then that impulse comes to something more, and they fall into it and wonder how it ever happened. The second thing is this, look, you have to watch out for the enemy. So number one, avoid impulses. Number two, because that's what gets you there, following your impulses. Number two, the enemy is so cunning and crafty and deceitful, and he's not an idiot at all. He is incredibly smart, okay? Not that we have to worry because Dad takes care of us, right? Our Heavenly Father. But he is insanely cunning. You know what he does? Check this out. Watch. I'm going to say this, and half of you are going to do this, all right? You're going to do this. You're going to look up and to your left. You're going to go like this. You're going to go, okay? Because you're going to think of times where, oh my God, that totally happened in my life, all right? You always look up and to the left because you're accessing your memory. Anyways, it's a different thing. So check this out. You ever do this? You ever have the enemy tempt you, not to sin, but to tempt you to get into a place to where he can totally tempt you to sin? You ever have that happen? You know, it's not a sin to go out with a girl that I like, just the two of us by ourselves. It's not a sin, and it's not a sin. It's not. But it's totally a place where you're going to get tempted to sin. The enemy doesn't tempt you with sin a lot of times. He tempts you with getting into a place that isn't sin, but it's stupid, and then he tempts you with sin, and then you're already surrounded. The enemy's plan is always the same, divide and conquer. So that way when you're struggling with something, shame will separate you from God, and pride will separate you from people, okay? He gets you proud because what are other people going to think if you tell them this? And you know, you ask them to hold you accountable. If you become vulnerable, vulnerability is a weakness is what the enemy says, although Christ says it's a strength. Okay, if you become vulnerable, what's everybody going to say about you? Well, I don't want people to think ill of me, so I'm not going to say anything. That's pride, right? And then shame separates us from God, where we go, you know what, I'm ashamed. I'm too ashamed to come before the Lord and talk to him. I'm just going to sit there and go, God, I repent, forgive me. I'm going to turn away. I'm not going to do it again. We never have to talk about it, and you move on. But God never really has any ability to have any access to your heart when we approach him that way. Shame separates us from God. Pride separates us from people. The enemy's plan is always the same, to get us cornered and by ourselves into a place to where he can tempt us then with sin. You think the enemy's going to hammer you when you're surrounded by your brothers and your sisters? No. He's going to hammer you when you're alone. That's when he's going to hammer you. Let me give you an example. You have to watch for the enemy. If I told you, this is an example that I've given oftentimes, if I told you that I got mugged at the Galleria at like 4 p.m, you'd be like, what in the world? In the mall? I was like, yeah. I was like at the crepe place getting some gelato, and then some guy came in a mask and a gun, and he took my money, and then he escaped somehow. Everybody would be like, that's insane. How did that happen? Did they catch him? They must have had video cameras, okay? Everybody would think that's insane. If I told you I got mugged in Oak Park off of 26th and Martin Luther King, where I used to live, because it was 3 a.m. and I was walking down an alley, none of you would say that's insane. None of you would say, how did that ever happen? You know what everybody would say? You're an idiot. What are you doing in Oak Park at 3 a.m? That's what everybody would say. And you know why? Because they're right. Because you'd have to be crazy to be at Oak Park at 3 a.m. walking through an alley. You understand what I'm saying? Look, it's not a sin to hang out with a girl that you like by yourself at your house and watch a movie without your parents home. It's not. It's stupid, but it's not a sin. Do you see what I'm getting at? Okay? It's not necessarily no, actually, it's clearly not. It's not a sin to go and to be alone in private places, but it's stupid. It's foolish. You know what that person is being? They're being totally intoxicated by their desires. They are not being watchful or vigilant at all. And the enemy who walks around like a roaring lion is prowling around and sets them up for the kill. You think lions attack things when they're in strength? No, they always peel one off the herd, and that's what they go for. You understand what I'm getting at? So you got to be vigilant. This graph, you know what this is? This is a young couple who got into a relationship, and they just had no rules, no boundaries, no nothing. And within 3 months, they got to marriage territory. And they don't know what to do at this point. Now, this is what I want to tell you. You have one of 3 options. When you get to this point, if this is you that I'm talking to right now, you have realistically one of 3 options. One is bad, one is worse, and one is good. Okay? The bad one is you can cross over into marriage territory. Right? That's an option. I'm telling you your real options, okay? You can cross over into marriage territory. You can start sleeping together. You can start living together. You can start doing all of the other stuff that's reserved just for marriage. You can open up your heart. By the way, you know how you're supposed to reserve certain parts of like physical intimacy for marriage? Did you know there's parts of your heart and your spirit and everything else that you're also supposed to reserve for marriage? You don't give that stuff away on day one. Hey, do you want to, hey, you want to go steady? Yeah, that's the way you do it, fellas, all right? Hey, you want to go steady? And the girl goes, oh, yeah, let me tell you my deep, dark secrets. Nope, that's not the way you do that, all right? That is the wrong way to do that. There's a process. You grow, okay? So you get into this point, you have 3 options. Option number 1 is you cross over into marriage territory. Let me tell you something. When you cross over into marriage territory, there's 2 things I want to say to you. Number 1, it doesn't matter if you have already, or if you will in the future, which I hope that after this talk, you'll be inspired not to. It doesn't matter if you have already or if you will in the future. Shame automatically comes. Regret automatically comes. You can't fully enjoy what God has for you. I'm just being real with you, all right? I've had things that I've committed in my life. Don't get me wrong, my wife and I, we didn't cross over marriage boundaries until we were married. But I've had things in my life, like you've had things in your life, sin, where after you've sinned, you regretted it. Regret comes with sin. So do you think that crossing this threshold, which is sin, is not going to come with regret? Of course it is. Of course it's going to come with regret. It's going to come with hurt. It's going to come with missing out on some things that God designed for you to be able to fully enjoy. And now instead you're going to have this shadow hanging over it. If you've already crossed it, you know what I'm talking about. And that's the second thing I want to talk to you about, which is if you've crossed that boundary, what I love about God is that he has a way of redeeming things, not just back to the way that they were, but he has a way of taking sin and using it for being able to be glorified out of it. Why? Because, if the Lord never if there was never sin, then the Lord would never be able to crush sin. Do you understand? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, so then what should we do? Should we increase in sin so that way God could be even more glorified? Right? Paul talks about that. No, absolutely not. What I'm getting at is consider this. God walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. They had intimacy. They were in relationship. They were in this created relationship, right? Then man fell into sin. And then God already made the plan in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16 or 15. I think it's 16. God made the plan of Christ, cross, and redemption. And after Jesus was crucified, died, and was raised again 3 days later, we have the opportunity to be what? The bride of Christ. Do you realize that before there was sin in the world, we never had the opportunity to be the bride of Christ? Wrap your brain around that for a minute. I'm not saying that we should sin so that way God can be even further glorified, because that's wrong. But what I am saying is we think a lot of times that, because I've sinned, the best that I can be is a second-class Christian. And God says, no. If you've sinned, I can redeem you and use your sin for my glory. Because you can tell people about, I was stuck there and God freed me. And that's huge. Wrap your brain around that. You understand what I'm saying? That's fantastic. So the 2 things that I want to get at to you out of this graph is just this. Number 1, if you go there, you will regret it and you should not head there. If you've already headed there, God can redeem and restore you, not as a second-class, second-rate citizen, but as somebody that he can use as a testimony and to give glory to him. All right? So that's graph number 1. That's pretty huge, isn't it? Sorry, that's graph number 2. I got this. It was upside down. All right. I got this, in the words of Victor. Oh, I'm sorry. I never gave you the options, all of them. So, option number 1 was crossing over into the boundaries of marriage. Option number 2, which is less bad but still bad, is you plateau. You go, you know what, that's fine. And you know what, this is what people think is the best option. This is what most people think. This is the best option. You know what, I'll just plateau. We'll just kind of hang out right here, and we won't do marriage stuff, and we'll just be close and in good relationship, and we're just going to plateau. You ever hear the stories of people where they go, man, you know, it was so great while we were dating, then we got married, and everything just kind of went flat? You all heard that story. We've seen it in movies a billion times. Option number 2 is less bad because you're not crossing into sin, but it's still bad, and I'll tell you why. Because when you plateau in the relationship after you get married, do you think that thing's going to get jump-started? Most times when people get married, it plateaus automatically. There's like this plateau thing that happens after you get married, all right? The guy no longer pursues because he got what he was pursuing, okay? And it has to do with success and security, which is why there's the issue, but that's actually the next lesson. But if it plateaus, you know how hard it is to jumpstart a relationship that's plateaued? I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's hard. So if you plateau, you go into marriage, you think all of a sudden, boom, we got married, now we can cross over this physical threshold, and now everything's great. We're investing in one another, and we're growing in a relationship. It's not going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to do this, and then you're going to get married, and then it's going to do this. And it's going to continue to plateau on the other side of the line that's reserved for marriage. That's it. So that's not a great option. Option number 3. This one comes in two versions, all right? Option number 3 is right here. Version 1 is you've come to a place where you can't grow anymore and you realize that marriage is still a few years off, okay? What you do is this is a great option, is you go on the back burner. You go, look, I can't marry you for another 3 to 4 years. You can't marry me for another 3 to 4 years. It's not going to happen, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to remain best friends. We're going to be exclusive. I'm not going to go talk to some other girl. You're not going to talk to some other guy. But we're going to focus on building ourselves spiritually and on growing until we come to a place to where I can actually call you my girlfriend and you can call me your boyfriend again. And then in a very short period of time, like roughly 6 months-ish around there, it's just a general guide. It could be a year. It could be 3 months. Doesn't matter. Whenever you get ready for marriage and you go, okay, we're going to get ready for marriage. You're going to graduate 3 months later. We're going to get married. Boom. Great. But you go on the back burner. You no longer call yourselves boyfriend and girlfriend. You're no longer a couple. You're no longer in a relationship. You're waiting for one another. And that's a great option. You know why? Because all of the things that are reserved for boyfriends and girlfriends are not on the table anymore. You're just best friends. You understand? So you remove all of the stuff that kept you next to that dashed line. You take it completely off of the graph and off of the table. And then when it's time to start a relationship again, you don't just start overnight and you're back up right next to there. You take it slow and you reassess the way that you're going to have a relationship and what you're going to do and what the relationship's going to look like. And then you have a growth curve again, all right? Next one. That makes sense? That was good? All right, good. All right, this one's great. It's real. It exists a lot. One of these exists a lot in the Romanian community, which I find hilarious. So in slide number 3, there's 2 options. There's 2 different yellow lines. One is healthy growth, but bad time frame. So you see, this isn't a year. This is 3 months. So you see that lower line, option 1? It's like a healthy growth rate. You're not growing super fast. You're not crossing all these boundaries. You're growing at a very healthy rate. But the guy proposes to you 3 months in. You understand what I'm saying? Like you're in a relationship, you're talking to some guy, and 3 months go by, and all of a sudden the guy's like, hey, I want to get married. And you're like, I'm not even really sure 100% about who you are, you know what I mean? And it's 3 months in. I mean, can you imagine if you started dating a guy, ladies, and it was just regular growing, you guys met, every few days, maybe every week in the beginning, and and you're just kind of growing at this comfortable rate, and then 3 months later he pops the question. You're like, whoa, way too fast, okay? Yeah. John was like, I could never, ever have somebody do that to me. So, this is typically someone just looking to get married. Look, I'm going to be really real with you, all right? Because this is totally Romanian, all right? If they don't have a green card, that might be part of the issue. I'm just going to say it, all right? Sometimes a brother's visa is about to expire, and he's just like, I need to lock this down, all right? I'm just letting you know this is real life. It's true. It's totally true. I had a good friend of mine call me once, and she's like, hey, this guy wants to marry me from a different country. And she's like, but he wants me to sign a prenuptial agreement. What do you think about this? And I was like, okay, have you two been talking? She's like, for like a few months on the phone. I was like, no, this is the worst idea ever. You know what I mean? Like, just Jesus, no. So anyway, that's option number one. But this is what I want to say to you. And this is mostly to the ladies, because it's usually not the ladies rushing off to get married within 3 months. It's usually a fella trying to push it quickly. And I just want to say this to the ladies. Number one, don't settle. Don't settle. Don't settle, okay? For me, there are certain words in the English language that they're like swear words, okay? The word settle is one of them. I hate the word settle, all right? That means that something should have been, and it's settled. I hate the word settled. One of the worst things that I've experienced being a youth leader and mentoring people is seeing people settle beneath their potential. It is the worst. You invest years and time and energy and love and effort and care, and then you see people settle for less, and you just want to die, all right? Ladies, do not settle. And I want to say this. Do not let your insecurities cheapen your worth. Do not let your insecurities cheapen your worth, okay? Listen to me. Hear me. Just because some guy isn't willing to fight for you doesn't mean that you're not worth fighting for. You understand what I'm saying? Every young lady here is absolutely worth fighting for. You're a daughter of Christ. I mean, wrap your brain for a second around the fact that God made you wonderful and he made you valuable. And don't let, because you might be insecure because the other girls got this or that, or because everybody's getting married because it's married season or God knows what, don't let those things cheapen your worth. All right? There are insecurities that trigger automatically for ladies, and I know that. There are some things that you're insecure about. When somebody brings it up, you just feel like you want to hide somewhere. Okay, don't let that cheapen your worth. You're valuable. Now listen, 2 things I want to say to you. Number 1, you're worth fighting for. Just because some guy isn't wanting to fight for you doesn't mean that you're not worth it. You're worth fighting for. Just maybe not to that guy, and that's fine. Maybe you're not a good fit, and that's great. That's fine. There's no problem with that. And number 2, actually 3 things. Number 2, every girl wants to be a part of an adventure. Don't pursue a guy who makes you the adventure. Don't pursue a guy who makes you the adventure. You ever see a girl, fellas, all of us, you ever see a girl that has a guy that's so head over heels for the girl, he's willing to do anything that she wants, and that girl is like, bah, you're smothering me, get away. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, fellas, that's what happens when you make her the adventure. But when you're confident, which is the most attractive quality in a man on earth, you can ask any girl, okay, but when you're confident because you know who you are and where you're going, all right, that means that you're already on a trajectory, you're on an adventure, and a girl wants to be a part of that, okay? So don't settle for a guy that wants to make you the point, because once he gets you, you're not going to be the point anymore, and then you're going to miss out. You understand? You join together with a guy who knows who he is and where he's headed, and then you're together headed for that, which is the point, which is hopefully Christ. So Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, it says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Guard your heart, protect your heart. The third thing I wanted to say to you is this, is also don't pursue a guy that conjures up your beauty. And here's what I mean by that. You know what you have as far as beauty goes, that you have like, that you're like, man, I have like really beautiful hair. You know that's like your thing. You know what I mean? Or you're just like, oh, you have, big beautiful eyes or whatever. That's your thing, okay? Don't let some guy just say a line about something that you know is not true about you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because that means that somebody's trying to buy you. Don't let somebody conjure up your beauty. The man that you're looking for is somebody who will unveil the beauty that you already have, not some made-up beauty. The beauty that you have. And it's waiting to be unveiled, and I know that. And so those are just the 3 things that I wanted to share with you guys that I had on my heart. Guard your heart from insecurities. Guard your heart from cheapening your worth. Option 1. Option 2 is unhealthy growth in an unhealthy time frame. People who grow super quick are just looking to get married. And If you've known a person for just 3 months and you want to marry them already or in less than 3 months, it's done on impulse. You ever see like a young couple who are like 15 and 16 and they're just like, we're so in love with each other. Like, this is insane. And it's like, how long? You guys ever meet people like that? I once met a young guy and he's like, dude, I'm so in love with this girl, Eddie. I'm so in love with her. And I'm just like, oh my God, how long have you guys been together? 2 weeks. I know it sounds crazy, Eddie, but it's insane, man. I've never experienced anything like, and this is a true story. Like, I thought he was screwing with me. I was like, no way. This guy's totally joking with me. Nope. Completely true. Yeah. It was weird. Really weird. So look, people that want to get married on impulse, do you realize that when the impulse wears off, it's like ordering the 2 monster tacos. They're no longer nearly as delicious. You look at them and you go, man, me skudaba. Like, I don't want anything to do with any more food. You marry on impulse, listen to me. That's a lifelong decision. You don't make lifelong decisions on impulse. You don't go to Jack in the Box on impulse, all right? Much less make a lifelong decision. You understand what I'm saying? All right? So that's option number 2, all right? You don't do that. It's not wise. You know what's another decision that people make on impulse? I'm just going to throw it out there. Sleeping together, all right? Hear me on this. Well, it's going to get awkward, all right? And they don't use any protection of any sort, and they make another life. That sucks, man. It's hard. It's hard to be a single mom or a single dad or to be an unwed mom and an unwed dad, and it's unfair to that kid. I'm just being real with you, all right? You think that decision comes by planning? No, that decision comes on impulse. Don't make life-altering decisions on impulse. Don't even make little decisions on impulse. You know what impulse is for? You know what that's for? You know what emotion is for? It's not for decision making. It's for decision executing. You make your decisions with logic. You think about it, you weigh it out, and then you make a decision, and then you execute it with all of your heart. You don't execute it with your brain, or else everything will be boring. You execute it with all of your heart. All right? So emotions are for executing. Logic is for deciding. All right? Anyway, next one. Next one, and then after that, we'll just talk about the good stuff, all right? This is the 5-year not plan, all right? This is the worst anti-plan on earth, okay? 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 9 says, but if they can't control themselves, they should go ahead and get married. It's better to marry than to burn with passion. So if you're not able to marry yet, then you don't put yourself in a place where you'll burn with passion. Song of Solomon chapter 2, verse 7 says, do not awaken or arouse love before it pleases. And the NLT, it says, not to awaken love until the time is right. So don't date until the time is right. When is the time right? When you will be ready within a year of marriage is a pretty good guide. If this is you, break up. I know that sounds like the craziest thing that anybody's ever said to you in your entire life. Listen to me. If you're not ready to get married for another 4 or 5 years, all you're doing is you're setting yourself up on an impulse with no plan ahead of you for a world of hurt. I have known, I want to say 1 or 2, it's really more like 1.5 couples. And I mentor a lot of couples. I speak into the life of a lot of couples. I travel. The reason why you guys don't usually see me on Sundays is because I'm in another city, state, or country. All right? I travel an insane amount. In the first year that I started traveling, I was gone between 15 to 20 weekends out of the year. Like, I'm gone a lot. In 2015, I left in October, and I was back home at Christmas. All right? Like, I'm gone all the time. So I'm meeting with couples everywhere. I know of 1, possibly 2. Couples that were on the 5-year plan and that did not cross boundaries and ended up regretting it. I know of 1, possibly 2. And that's it. Okay? If you're on a 5-year plan, you're literally putting yourself in constant temptation for 5 years. Why? And I know what your fear is, man. I know what your fear is. If we break up, then she's going to find somebody else and we're not going to get married. Okay? Listen to me. If it was something that, if she's a serious girl and you're a serious guy, if it's something that was designed by God and meant to be, it'll come to pass. It'll happen. If she's a serious girl, then she'll wait. If she wasn't serious enough to wait for you for 2 or 3 years, is that really who you want to marry? I mean, think about that. She can't commit to being faithful to you for 2 or 3 years if you guys are waiting for one another, and that's who you're scared of marrying. Oh no, if I don't keep her trapped here, she'll leave me. Yeah, that's a perfect person to marry, said no one ever, all right? That's a horrible idea. You understand? It's like, I was about to date myself. I was about to say something, and you're all about to say you're really old, all right? I didn't say it, and I'm not gonna. All right, so no. So this is literally the worst plan ever. The two things that I deal with the most as I travel, the number one thing is this statement. Eddie, I don't believe that God will forgive me. You don't understand what I've done. That's the number one thing that I think that people struggle with. The number two is we've been in a relationship for 5 years, 6 years, 8 years. And you know what? When I first gave this series 2 or 3 years ago, this was insane. People were like, 5 years? Who dates for 5 years? Do you know how many couples I know that have been together for 8, 9, and 10 years now? I mean, it's insanity. It's insanity. All right, so let me just give you the last one, and then, yeah, that looks great. Yeah, yeah, you can do that. So how does this happen? If this is the goal, how does this happen? All right, this happens real easy. Number one, it's about right timing. When you're ready or close to being ready for marriage, then you should start pursuing relationship. It's about right timing, okay? You have to find right timing. If you're not ready for marriage, then don't pursue it. Number two, it's about right process, investing in relationship. Have you guys ever heard that whatever you feed grows? Are you guys familiar with that at all? For like 9 years, familiar with that? No? Okay. When you're ready or close to being ready, that's timing. Right process is if you feed it, it will grow, right? Investing in relationship, whatever you feed grows. So don't feed the wrong things and start feeding the right things. This is really about not feeding the wrong things like your impulses and feeding the right things like creating a relationship where in that year time, you're focused on praying together. You set pre-choice choices, or as Yanchi Saz calls them, non-negotiables. I grew up knowing them as non-negotiables. You know what's the hardest thing to do? To say no when you're in the middle of a temptation. To make a decision when you're completely intoxicated by emotion, to make a logical decision. That's hard. You know what's easy to do? To keep a decision that you made when you were in right thinking. Let me give you a great example of a pre-choice choice. It's never be alone in private places. That's a great boundary for a 1-year term, gonna go get married kind of a relationship. It's a great way to keep that in a steady slope. Never be alone in private places. You know how hard it is to not decide to go and be just the two of you alone if you haven't made that choice? When you're in the moment to make that choice, you know how hard that is? Oh, hey, why don't we just go over here to this park, it's really nice, and I want to show you something. How do I say no? But if you've made a pre-choice choice together, then you go, yeah, no, we made a decision beforehand that we would never do that. So let's not put ourselves in a place where the enemy's going to tempt us, okay? So it's the right process. I wrote down some examples of people, of great couples in our church, and of some of the examples that they had in their lives. Pray together. If you're in discipleship, before you go to your discipleship group meeting once a week, do your teeny Bible study reading together. That's brilliant. Go to Bloom, go to Shady, go to Owl, go to all of these different, hodgepodge coffee shops, Fig Tree in downtown Roseville, Temple Coffee, whatever the coffee places that you go to, right? The Mill, Chocolate Fish, whatever. Okay, you go to that place and you meet up with your girl or your guy, and you guys do your Bible study together. You're not in private, you're in a public place, and you do Bible study together, and you decide to do that once a week. And that's fantastic. It's a brilliant idea. Fasting together. Take a day a week to fast together. Hold each other accountable to the commitments that you've made. Like, man, I really want to grow in my, be more faithful in church attendance and serving in this ministry. Hold people accountable to that. Another right process is meeting with mentors to gain insight and advice. Most of you are in discipleship. In fact, almost all of you are in discipleship, and you have mentors in your groups. Meet with them and gain insight. Ask them, hey, man, you're married. Your relationship's got some great things. What advice could you give me about the dating life? No dating. John's a group leader. But he's still single. Yeah, it's good. Thirdly, read different books on relationships, how men and women work, etc. I could recommend to you a ton of books, all right? And then lastly is right boundaries, making those pre-choice choices. Here's some right boundaries that great couples in this church have set up and have followed and have been blessed by them. Some examples are don't talk after 11 p.m. Don't talk or text after 11 p.m. Snapchatting after 11 p.m. It's not a sin, but it just might be stupid. All right? I don't have to fill in the blank, all right? Don't hang out, just the two of you, anytime after 10, or never be alone in private places. See each other no more than 3 to 4 times a week. If you see each other every single day a week, how fast do you think that yellow line is going to grow? Stupid fast, all right? You know what number 4 is? Never be alone in private places. All right, number 5. This is like one of my favorite ones because this is like it's theologically accurate, but it's so like kutoporu, like it's so like just brash. Don't touch each other. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. You can take that. It's like so theologically accurate, but not deep at all. You know, just don't touch each other. Ta-da! You know. That's a good one. That's a great one. Oh, hey, I'll pick you up for church, and it's just the two of you in the car. No, nothing's going to happen in the car. What part of don't be alone in private places did you not register? You understand? Hey, you're going to go pick up your girlfriend? That's great. Take your little brother. You understand? Yeah. Let your mom come with you, and she sits in the front. That's it. David said that, and that was brilliant. Sora Simona, Cristina and Spate. That's great. So that's it for part one of the series. What I want to encourage you guys to do, and sorry, I know that we went quite a ways today, but I wanted to share that testimony with you guys. I hope that was all right. But ultimately, my desire and you, and I believe your desire as well, and I can tell you all of our leadership's desire, is for you guys to have great relationships, to be great godly people, and to have great marriages. Listen to me. You know what a great marriage is? You know what the standard is for a great marriage? You know what most people's standard is? You know what the standard is in our church? This is the standard in our church, the unspoken standard in our church of great marriages. You want to hear it? There's low divorce rate. Look how long everybody stayed together. But just because two people stayed together does not mean that they have a great marriage. A butler and a maid can live in the same house. Doesn't mean they have a great marriage. I just thought of that, and that was crazy, all right? Just think about that for a second. A butler and a maid can live in a house. It doesn't mean they have a great marriage, all right? And so what I'm getting at is this, is what we desire is that you guys will have great marriages. You know, I was talking with a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, and he was telling me, he was talking to a friend of his, and he's just like, oh, no, dude, you know, don't tell your wife that. What idiot told you to tell your wife that? And he's like, well, I tell everything to my wife, to this third person. And my friend goes, what idiot told you to tell everything to your wife? And that guy goes, Eddie. It's a true story. And he looks at me and I was like, yeah, bro, that the two shall become one. Did you not like wrap your brain around that? Like just two become one, transparency, accountability. And he's like, wait, what do you mean your wife holds you accountable? I was like, oh my God. So, but have a long conversation about all of that. The thing that I'm getting at is this. Actually, we haven't had that conversation yet, but I'm praying about that. The thing that I'm getting at is this, is we want you to have a great marriage. All right? Just think about, this is the last thing I'll say, all right? Then we'll close. The last thing I'll say. How many churches or groups of people or communities do you know that have the number of great marriages that we have in this church, right? Mike and Jenny, Adi and Ruth, David and Christina, right? There's so many, Justin and Becky. Becky, I looked back and she was going like this, like, wow. Danny and Becky, all right? We have so many great marriages in this church, all right? Great marriages in the young age group. Fantastic marriages. Why? Because they invest in their marriages, all right? So with that, I want to invite you guys to stand. I want to thank you guys for your time, and then we'll be picking this back up in like 3 weeks, all right? So we'll be together for that. Dave, do you want to close? You want me to close? I will close. Oh, did you still have announcements?